2/3 of your entire marketing function is operating in the dark. A business doesn't survive or die based on a good idea.
If you follow this plan, you get predictable profits.
There's massive disruption coming, closer to a 6 to 9 month window. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Today's guest is known as the CEO Whisperer, the coach behind some of the world's fastest scaling 6, 7, and 8-figure businesses, especially agencies. Charlie Gaudet is the founder and CEO of Predictable Profits, where he helps CEOs install battle-tested operating systems that turn chaos into clarity and transforms growth into predictable, repeatable profits. He's also the host of the Beyond 7 Figures podcast. He runs 3 businesses today and has founded many, many more. He's been recognized by the International Business Times as the go-to business coach for 7 and 8-figure businesses. Yahoo Finance knows him as the CEO Whisperer, and MSN is a leading coach to 8 and 9-figure CEOs. So frankly, the results with him speak for themselves. A marketing agency CEO went from $950K to over $66 million. A wellness center grew from $250K a year to $250K every 3 weeks in just 2 years. Another went from 2 to 3 leads per month to 2 to 3 leads per day in 90 days total. I'm Adam Spector, a 4-time founder and investor in over 200 early stage startups. I'm the CEO of Chore, where we help world-class founders manage and deal with all their back office admin so they can go back to focusing on growth. Listen in to this fantastic conversation. I learned a huge amount, and I know you will too. Welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. It is with great pleasure. I have Charles Gaudet. We had a discussion about it. I pronounced it the proper way previously, but everyone else says it differently, so I probably got it wrong to the different way. The reason we have him on the show and it is really because Charles is one of these like serial entrepreneurs, but he's also coached to a huge number of entrepreneurs. He started more businesses than he can really count. He currently runs at least 3 that he's running. He's also coaching a ton of founders as well with their businesses and just does so many different things. His main thing is called the founder and CEO of Predictable Profits. So Charles, what did I get wrong with that intro, and welcome to the channel?
Hey man, no, it was great. It was great. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
The podcast is Entrepreneurial Excellence. Yeah. How do you define that? If you would define that in your mind or for other people, what is an excellent entrepreneur?
So that's a really great question. And it's funny because I think depending on the conversations that I have, my answer might actually change.
Okay, why? Because the audience is different, or you're in a different mood yourself?
I deal with some of the smartest people in the world, right? And so in working with that group, I'll see something and it will influence my perspective. But if you look at one of the things that nearly every truly exceptional, excellent entrepreneur is masterful at, it's their data, right? They're able to know their data, but not just know data. Like when I speak I talk to, hundreds of companies a week, right? And so there's a difference between saying, oh yeah, no, we know our profit and our revenue, or we know how many leads, we know our website traffic, all that other stuff. But data needs to have context in order for it to be relevant. And so let's take marketing as an example. Many people tend to think that they do marketing, but you can't actually do marketing, which is an interesting, you can't do, it's like me saying I do doctor. I can't do marketing. I just had this conversation with the CEO of a $500 million company, and I said, so, all right, you say you do marketing. Let's put this contextually so we understand how effective you, quote unquote, do marketing. Marketing is a function of how you create, capture, and nurture demand. So how effectively are you at creating demand? And he looked at me with this blank stare.
Like, what do you even mean basically by that?
Yeah, he's like, I don't know. I go, okay, so how effective are you at creating demand? Oh, thousands of leads per week, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, got it. What about nurturing that demand? How effective are you at nurturing demand? And he didn't have an answer for that. And so I said, well, then what we're looking at here is that 2/3 of your entire marketing function is operating in the dark. That was a big eye opener for him. So, if you look at entrepreneurial excellence, those who are the best of the best, they have all their data. It's very quick to be able to know what's working, what's not working, where you need to, what needs your attention, and where opportunities exist, and so forth. So, I'd say that that's the common denominator between everybody.
So to dig into that a little bit further, right? Just make sure I really understand it. When you say it's actually the best entrepreneurs are the ones who know all the parts of their data. Maybe just to add some words for you, it's sort of saying, once again, like someone might know, okay, well, how much revenue did I make or what my costs are? But you're saying really good founders have a good handle on, hey, I know a lot of the key metrics for marketing, or I know all the key metrics for my product. And like they actually can tell you offhand, like, yep, boom, I know what's happening here. I know how long this is taking.
So there's contextualized data, right? So it's, for everything from, we talked about how effective are you creating, capture, nurture demand. So contextualized data. And then, if I look at you and I say, okay, do we have the right people in the right seat? Like, you'll know that answer if you have data, if everybody on the team has a KPI. But even when we talk about that, like, it has to be contextualized in the right format. So, we work with a lot of companies. Most of them tend to be agencies. Some of them start around the 6-figure range with us, but 7 and 8 figures is where, a lot of them really our sweet spot is. But when we look at this and we say, do we have the right people in the right seat? And, do they have KPIs? And when they look at the KPIs, it's like, okay, we actually need to understand that KPIs actually have to be formed in the right way. And just to kind of paint this picture for you. So as CEO, you would be on the right-hand side of an equal sign. If you think about a math formula, you would be on the right-hand side of the equal sign. Mm-hmm. The people that reporting to you will be on the left-hand side of the equal sign. So it would be this person plus this person plus this person would equal yours, which would be revenue and profit. So what needs to happen? What are those key KPIs that equal revenue and profit? And then those people, now they move to the right-hand side of the equal sign, and the people reporting to them are now on the left-hand side of the equal sign. This plus this plus this. Not only does that help to contextualize the data, and everybody sees how their role plays an integral part in the overall growth of the organization, but what it also does is when it comes to hiring, you hire for the KPI. You don't hire to get more stuff off your plate. You hire specifically, for the KPI. What is it that you're trying to solve? Because that helps to define, this is not only your North Star, but these are the expectations, both in activities and skills and abilities and all that other stuff that needs to happen to make sense.
Interesting. So, okay. So you hire, that's a kind of really cool way of putting it. So you're hiring for the KPI that you're trying to solve for, not for a person, which makes sense. I mean, people don't necessarily solve, I'm going to hire this person. They're trying to solve for X problem, but you're saying it's not a problem. It's a KPI itself specifically. It's like, I need to hit X goal.
Right. Like when we work with clients and it's like, okay, we want to expand the team. It's like, let's draw out the org chart and let's take a look at, which KPIs you need and who owns what KPIs and which KPIs nobody then owns and who needs to be put in place in order to fulfill that KPI and succeed and do well. And everybody has the ability to have a KPI. Like, there's not a single role in the company where they shouldn't have a KPI.
Yeah, I was going to ask. That makes sense.
Well, and let's think about this for a minute, right? So as a founder, one of the struggles that we often have is saying to ourselves, do I have the right people, the right person in the right seat? And then when you have that doubt, you start wondering, how effective are they? Especially if they're remote, there's often these challenges. How effective are they? And then it's like, at what point do I let them go? And then we don't know at what point do we let them go. Or on the contrary, if they come back and ask for a raise, well, wait.
You mismatch. If you're thinking you're going to let someone go and they're asking for a raise, there's mismatched expectations.
There is, but at some point people do ask for a raise. So even if they're doing well and they ask for a raise, well, the general rule of thumb is, yes, you get a raise the moment you are worth more than I'm already paying you right now. And how do you defend that? You defend that through KPIs. That's a whole other conversation. But then, when you look at this stuff and it's like, okay, so, do we have the right person in the right seat? How effective are they? Should I let them go and everything else? You want to make sure you have a KPI in place so that it's like, this is your North Star. This is what you're supposed to do. If you fall below that KPI, then we have an agreement in place that, you're going to go on a PIP. And for those who aren't familiar with the term PIP, it's what's traditionally referred to as a performance improvement plan.
Yep.
Recently, within our board of directors clients, we renamed it to a performance investment plan.
I like that. More positive.
Yeah, a PIP's not supposed to be a negative thing. What a PIP is doing is saying, hey, look, you've fallen below our minimum threshold. And so we're going to give you additional coaching, resources, support. We want to keep you within this company, and we want you to be wildly successful. So we're going to give you every resource and tool available to bring you back up to speed. And so we're really investing more into that particular person as a commitment to them that we want to keep them.
So, okay, so I want to ask a lot of questions about that. But before we get way too far, I have to make two comments really quickly, or ask more about KPIs. But one, to your it kind of mathematical model for how that works, the sort of your team plus equals a leadership person. Should that be plus or multiplied? So is it each person is addition to each other, or are they multiplied? Because that can help you go, if you have a person who's actually taking down the team and they're a 0.5 value, like, does that actually take things down? So I don't know, it rang in my head and like, these are additional, but I'm like, are they additions or are they multiplied?
That's a really good question. I've never looked at it in that framework. What I will do, so part of the CEO scorecard that we build out is we've got this algorithm that we designed that there's a separate tab that is for team performance, and everybody on the team is enlisted on that tab, and they're only given 2 scores, either met expectations or fell below expectations. And so what happens is you look at everybody on the team and you get a grade, right? Or the company gets a grade. And if you're at 80%, that means that only 80% of the team is actually meeting expectations. Now, the reality is if 80% of the team is meeting expectations, the company is still probably doing pretty good.
Yep.
It's probably growing, but maybe not growing all that fast. Probably a few little bumps in the road, but things are okay. You shouldn't be losing sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start falling below 80%, now, your stress levels are going to be high. It's probably a little bit more dependence on you and a few key people. There's some vulnerability when it comes to sales and lead flow and churn and all that other stuff, right? So, you don't want to be a C. A C in a grade is not that good, right? And then you can also look back at it and say, who are the managers of these people? And how long have the people reporting up to the managers been operating in a red metric and underperforming? And then you begin to see how effective the managers are in their role as well. So, it's a really cool illustration.
How does that work? Wouldn't someone say, well, like the scoring is somewhat dependent on who writes the test? In other words, like, what if I want to make myself feel good about my company, so I'm going to make the grades easy. I'm like, sorry, my grading curve is a very easy one. So yes, we're hitting 80%, and like we have an okay company. Whereas other people might say I'm a hardcore and no one's hitting my targets at all, and my whole team sucks.
Great question.
Yeah.
So we frame the metrics in what we call the AIM framework. Now, to give credit where credit's due, I originally heard of this framework from a gentleman called Ofer Breyer, a really intelligent gentleman out of Israel. Shared just a really, really cool concept with me that I'm like, I like this. So it's AIM. And it's broken down, if you think AIM like a target, right? So A is for achievable, I is for ideal, and M is for minimum. And so when you create a KPI, let's say you have a KPI that you need to bring in, say, $100,000 in sales per month, right? Let's just say that's KPI, easy math. So you're going to say, all right, if it's $100,000, then I'm going to take 10 to 20% of that number, and that's going to be the minimum. So we'll create a little bit of a range, and we'll say, okay, so 80,000. So achievable is what you should be hitting, most of the time, but 80% of the time you should be hitting your achievable. Mm-hmm. And then you have minimum, which is 20% lower. So you've got 80,000. And then you have an ideal, which is about 10 to 20% higher. So let's say that's 120,000. Mm-hmm. So within that range, when you bring somebody onto the team, you're saying, look, if for whatever reason you fall below this minimum threshold, it automatically triggers a PIP, it automatically triggers a performance investment plan, if that's the word you tend to use, right? So we already have an agreement. You fall below the minimum, you go on a PIP. When we talk about the team performance tab that we were talking about earlier, if they fall below achievable, then they're not meeting expectations.
Yeah, 100%.
So we don't have this ambiguity or this variation. In fact, one of the things, so I've had several mentors throughout my life. One of the people who had a lot of influence on the way that we build and grow companies is a gentleman named Dr. W. Edward Deming. He's added more billions of dollars to process improvement that I've known to have ever lived before, ever. I never worked directly with Deming, but I worked with Deming's protege. And we, not only was he a mentor, and we did some business together as well. And then Deming's business partner ended up becoming a client of mine. And so, I became very, very intertwined with Deming and understanding that work. And when you're surrounded in that world, one of the things that you quickly learn is that variation is the enemy of excellence. That you need to minimize, if not eliminate, variation. You're going to have some, right? And so, when you look at most companies, their guardrails are wide open, if they even have guardrails, right? It's just, you hire one person, they do something a little different than another person, and there's variation all over the place. But then as you begin to build better systems and processes and training, those guardrails begin to start to close in a little bit. Now, when you're running an agency and maybe you have a little bit more creativity and whatnot, you want to keep it just wide enough that allows people to still have some flexibility, but not too wide where it's going to impact the client and your business itself. Some of the ways that you can do that, especially if we think about the agency world and whatnot, is to operate within frameworks, right? So
how do you define frameworks in that sense?
So a framework would be, how you do a certain thing. So step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. It's a framework. So there's a framework that is that is a process. And then there's a framework, and I'm going way deep on this, but there's a framework that is more of an illustrated description of the process itself. So, if you visited my website, predictableprofits.com, you'll notice on the homepage of my website, we have the Predictable Profits operating system. That is a framework, and it's to the best of our knowledge, it's the only framework to exist for companies that are doing 6, 7, and 8 figures who want to generate predictable, sustainable growth month after month, year after year. So that's a framework. So when you look at my team and my coaching staff and everything, when we look to help companies create predictable, sustainable growth in their business, it's all predicated upon the framework. So if you came to me and you're like, hey, Charlie, I have an inventory issue, and can you help me manage my inventory? Well, if we don't have a framework for that, then we're not going to say that we can specialize in that. You're not going to become a client so we can help you with inventory. We might have one person on the team that knows how to do it, but it's not part of a framework. And unless we're willing to build a framework around it, then we're not going to do it, because it's just, there's going to be too much variation. And then they may refer a client back to us. And if that person's no longer on the team, then, is
there a methodology then for every company that you say, this is how you build your frameworks, and how many frameworks does a company need to do this well?
Well, if you look at much larger companies like 9-figure companies, and you look at McKinsey and Bain and all those other folks, right? Deloitte, they have frameworks for everything. That's how you get a service-based organization to scale into, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I had a McKinsey consultant come over to my house, and I was talking to him, about how they are able to do and grow and scale their business, because it's all a service-based business, right? So I said, how do you do it? And he goes, well, it's simple. If we don't have a framework, then we don't do it. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, here's a perfect example. He said, I've been working with this client for a long time. They had a huge opportunity, and I knew how to solve for that. And so I went to my boss and I go, hey, they've got this opportunity. I know exactly what to do. I've had tons of experience in this. You mind if I take this on? And his boss said to him, put it into a framework to ensure that should anything happen to you, somebody else can take over and do it in the same way consistently. And he goes, wait, what? He goes, You can't take the work until you do the framework. So he had to create a framework to show how he would create that deliverability, present that to his boss. His boss then presented it to the other partners. They had to come back with feedback, sign off, and then he was able to take the job. So, it's all about, it's two things. It's number one, not only creating consistency, but there's another element of taking unconscious competence and then bringing it to conscious competence.
That framework. So unconscious to conscious framework, basically something that you can actually write down and repeat and read. How do you make sure, sort of for these companies, actually it's really funny. I had a sort of coffee conversation yesterday with a very senior person at another consulting firm, and we started talking about some of the same stuff. So what she was telling me, sort of interesting, she's like, some of their processes keep breaking down. And it sounds very similar to the challenges that we have. And I said, well, why? I assume you got this right. She's like, yeah, but people don't follow the process. People ignore it. And she's like, I let those people off my team. She's like, I would fire them if I could. Their company, the way they work, it takes a long time to fire people. But she's like, people just ignore the process that's in place. And that happens at my company, probably happens with you guys as well. How do you enforce following? It's one thing to have a framework. It's another thing to actually make sure it's followed.
Excellent question. I just went through this with a $20 million company as well. So excellent. So number one, it's a conversation that you have with the employee. And we say, look, here's the deal. There's KPIs that you have to hit and follow. And, when we assess you and, the value that you bring to the company, we look at things in two ways. It's activity and ability, right? And if you ever fall short on your KPI, we go back to activity and ability, right? So the activities are, are you doing the required activities? And part of that is following the process. And the ability is you need to have a baseline of skill.
Of course.
Obviously.
So you wouldn't be hired, hopefully, for that job unless you theoretically had that ability.
Though a lot of times, you're right. Though a lot of times what happens is you really don't know until they're really deep into the work.
Sure.
Right. I mean, they should have a good resume and everything else, but you've probably done this where you hire salespeople and they're seemingly awesome. Then you put them in for a little while and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, something's up.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So when we say, all right, activity, so that activity is, goes into the process. So are you doing the stuff and are you following the process? And we say, look, here's the deal. If you decide that you're going to go rogue and follow this process on your own and you're not meeting the KPIs. So if you're not meeting the KPIs and you go rogue, then whose problem is that? Is that my problem or is that ultimately your problem? And the employee will say, well, I guess it's my problem. Okay, got it. Now let's look at it differently. If you're doing the activities exactly as we've laid out and you're following the process exactly as it's laid out, is that my problem or is that your problem? I go, well, I guess that would be your problem. Right. So when it comes to your future here in this company, are you willing to put your career and your life on the line by going rogue on a process and owning the outcome of, or the consequence of what happens if for what random reason you I don't think so. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And so, there's that, but then how do you know if they're following the process or not? Wherever possible, of course, in today's world, so much is done remote. You do want to record conversations. That's one.
Yep.
But it's really important for the managers to just be aware and to be checking in all the time if processes are followed.
Is there automations you can do? You should be able to pull data from your systems to say, hey, this person's checking off various steps or they're reporting their numbers or whatever it is. Right?
Well, they all have to report the numbers. And in our company, numbers have to be reported before our 1 o'clock. So we have an executive meeting where we go through all the KPIs at 1 p.m. That's a condition of employment. If you don't report your numbers, then that's a condition of employment. You might get a warning or two, but then after that, you're out.
It's funny. We're probably putting something similar in place for us at Chore, for all these different products we have, different product lines, and people have trouble reporting on updating on the status. And I've sort of said hey, they're not going to be fired. they're not owned. These aren't like their full-time job owning these projects, but they will not be allowed to keep doing that project anymore. Like if they are unable to do the basic minimum of reporting things, they're just going to be off it. I think my team thinks it's a little harsh. I'm like, no, they're not going to get done. Like the basic minimum is to be able to report back on how it's going. So keeping people updated. So question though,
if they think that's harsh, then they won't like working for me.
I believe it. We should bring you in if you can tell them like this is what hard. This is what real hardcore is. So question though about the sort of the KPIs and meeting them and being achievable and in ability and activity. Is there wiggle room in there? And let me define what I mean there. Let's say someone says like, look, I'm hitting the numbers, but like this system sucks. Is there room for them saying this system is problematic and I don't agree with the way this is built? And here's my suggestion for improving it. Like I assume then that's totally fine if someone's giving you a good reason for why they're not following it and explain it and update why.
So I don't pretend to walk on water, and I make plenty of mistakes. I'll make mistakes every day. So it's not even like once a week or once a month. It's like every day I'm making several mistakes. But part of the process of growing and scaling a company, it's 3 steps: optimization, systemization, and then innovation, right? And so with optimization, it's knowing the numbers and, always keeping things, really refined and fine-tuned. Then you put it into a system so that it can be repeated over and over and over again, right? And then you have innovation, and innovation is, let's come up with something radical, crazy to make it new and different and really maybe even break something to get it over to that next level. So the optimization is a core component of how we operate. So if a team member has a suggestion that's going to make things that much better, where they can optimize it and improve their results, that's encouraged. But they can't come to us and say, hey, I've got an idea to make this better, if they don't already track the KPI and have a control, because we'll never understand the impact of the change without the KPI.
Right. And I presume part of it too is they have to prove out they actually understand the system they're trying to change. I mean, I'm a very big believer you can't try to go change something unless you actually have an understanding of it in the first place. Yeah. So you have to prove out that you're able to do it successfully, but say maybe not as good as you want, and here's the change. So for also implementing the KPIs in tracking in the system, how do you get people fully on board, especially like in an agency model? So what I find sometimes in agencies, but companies are the same way. Every company I've been at is sort of the same. People, they have their own opinions about things. They don't fully get it. They're like, it's working well the way I'm doing things already. Absolutely. Why do I need to follow this? This is more bureaucracy. This is annoying. Lots of excuses for why. And if things are going fine, then like, it's hard to say, well, actually, like you need to actually now spend extra time tracking every step and putting in your KPIs. So I know you've heard this one before, I'm sure. So how do we deal with it though?
All the time. And so I've been doing this now for 15 years. Yeah. And I've learned something fascinating. That has been the case. It has been true every single time. Top performers, they want everybody to know how well they're doing. They want metrics. They want numbers. They want to show, again, how great things are, right? Ambitious people that want to truly excel in their career. They want numbers so that they're not guessing about like how to do better and whatnot. Like they want the numbers. The people that fight against numbers, that fight against transparency, that fight against being held accountable, they're doing that for a reason.
Yeah.
They either don't have the confidence in themselves or the work that they're doing. They know they're underperforming, and they don't want to be held accountable to a standard where they feel they can't achieve. But here's what you're going to find, and this has been the case across the board. Do you know what the quote-unquote KPI is, or the measurement is for an employee who doesn't have a KPI? Do you know how they defend their position in your company?
Probably saying I do a lot of work or something.
You're 100% right. They say, I'm busy.
Yeah.
I'm busy. And then the more they feel like they're threatened, the more they begin to talk about how busy they are all the time. And then they'll get to the point where they'll try to convince you why you need to hire people because they're so busy. They're busy, busy, busy. This actually just happened for another agency that we work with, really, really successful agency, but they just didn't have KPIs in place. So we said, okay, we need to put in these KPIs and blah, blah, blah. And so they're awesome. They went ahead and they put the KPIs and they go, you're right. And they go, what do you mean you're right? What is the utilization rate that you're tracking right now? In other words, what are we seeing for billable hours? Yep. And they go, on average, 53%.
Oof, gosh, that's not, I mean, they should be, I mean, I assume the goal is to be closer to like 80% because you need a little bit of wiggle room if people get sick and things like that and back up. But
yeah, depending on the role, right? Some roles might be at 70%, some roles, they could be at 90%, like kind of depends on the role. But like it should never really fall below 70%. I mean, right? You aim for like you said, about 80%, would be great. There needs to be some buffer for stuff, but yeah, I know.
And what do they do? Do the team get freaked out when they see that? Like, do people then start fudging their numbers? Or is it like you can't fudge that stuff once the data is there?
Here's the thing is because again, KPIs have to come in the form of context. So somebody also has to own the KPI of, if we put a quote, what percentage of the contracts that we have are in line with the billable expectations. So if we put together a proposal and we estimated, 25 hours by the creative team, but the creative team itself is billing, 36 hours, then either the creative team messed up or the person who put the proposal together messed up, so somebody has to be accountable to that.
Yeah.
And then who let that slide? Who let that slide to go that far billable? And now who's going to eat that expense? Like there's a whole conversation that comes from it. So if they're going to fudge the numbers, there's a consequence. If they fudge the numbers, then they're saying, well, you had X amount of hours allocated to this project, but you're billing more. Why?
Yep.
You have to defend that.
Yeah. And then you defend it, you explain it, and then hopefully you improve or do better next time and get better in that situation.
And, anytime we start working with a company and now it's the first time that they're reporting KPIs and whatnot, we have to, how you share this information with the team is also important. Like, we don't want to come across and be like, hey, we're going to put KPIs in because we're holding you guys accountable and some of you guys are going to be fired because we'll come to the surface that you're bad performers. Like, that's a big mistake. Right. But we'll come to the table and we'll say, all right, hey, look, the company is growing and we've got massive ambitions and aspirations to take this company to the next level. And there's just so much guesswork and we need to be able to minimize some of that guesswork. So we're going to start instituting these KPIs. It's going to accomplish a few different things. Number one, you're going to get real clarity on, what your North Star is. The most important things that you need to be focusing in on. Like right now, where you sit within that KPI is not necessarily going to be as important, because what we need to do is figure out where you sit within the KPI and then help refine it to become more successful in your job. Maybe we have to go back and look at the systems and the processes, or maybe that there's something else. It's just more important to see where you sit in that and how we can best support you to bring everything to where it actually needs to be. So this isn't going to be one of those things where we're putting together these KPIs and we're going to start issuing a whole bunch of pink slips and everything else. It's not it. It's about taking our organization and up-leveling ourselves so we start operating at a world-class level, which is necessary and required to then get the company to the next level, right? I mean, I don't know where you sit with your company and whatnot, but if at any given point in time that you have aspirations for a liquidation event, right, that you want to exit the company for whatever reason, if you don't have these KPIs in place, then what happens is a company comes in, they go to acquire you, and they immediately discount you, massively discount you, because you don't have those KPIs.
Yeah.
All the ones that we're talking about right now. But when you have those KPIs in place and they're really well tuned in and defined, you've eliminated a lot of the guesswork from the investor, and now they're willing to pay a premium for that because you're organized and methodical and so forth. And we've had several clients go for these liquidation events where they've they'll never have to work a day in their life, and they've created generational wealth. Because there's 6 things that need to happen in order to create that generational wealth within a company and a liquidation event, and data is one of those.
And so, okay, so going back to data really quick, and then going back to KPIs, a bunch of questions there too. And to the point of putting the KPIs in place and actually just implementing this in the company, I assume still you're going to get pushback from people. They're going to say, I'm too busy to go do this stuff. And the answer just comes down to saying, hey, look, this is the direction we're going in as a company. And we believe this is how we get to the next level. And you kind of have to be on board. And I assume is there some point where someone, if they're not on board, you put the KPI in place for them. And if they don't follow it, you put them on a PIP and then they're out. Is that?
That's more or less. But I've also seen the KPIs are going to make a difference, the ones that they actually have to track. But I've seen other people go way overboard, and it's like, you've got 30 KPIs to track, every week. And it's like,
yeah,
what are you going to do with this information? Like, you're asking for people information that you're not going to do anything with. Like, what is a core KPI? What are the supporting KPIs? That's the most important thing. And then we have what I call like this check engine light. Right. So if you fall below a certain threshold and then the check engine light goes off, it's like, now we have to look. So let's say website traffic falls, right? Website traffic falls. The person responsible for website traffic, that falls. Check engine light goes off. Okay. Now we got to look under the hood. And now we'll go deeper into all the metrics that, we have to look at to see what's broken, what needs to get fixed and all that other stuff. But it's not necessary to track everything all the time unless you're going to do something with it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. We try to track very high level things at Chore, like, sort of like revenue per individual that they're kind of managing essentially. And then that has to do with like churn and things like that, and all kind of plays into it. For setting the KPIs, so it's easy to set a KPI for a salesperson or marketing, things like that. Like, that's easy to do.
Yeah.
What about for roles that are less clear? Like, let's use one that I would say like is very always hand wavy, like HR. How do I set a KPI for HR or for an EA or for, I don't know, there's thinking about lots of different roles in a company, or like new, product manager, like, is a KPI, did you ship the new product? Or did you ship a certain amount of code if you're an engineer? How do you set KPIs for a little bit more less clear or less defined roles?
So, awesome question. And this is going to be a little specific based on the agency itself. For an EA, it could be the number of projects that are delivered on time if you have the EA doing specific projects, or it could be, we're just going to give a rating. And the rating is going to be based on almost like a survey. And it's going to be like, were you responsive to, the quality of the emails or whatever else that you did. Like, you put together a little bit of a survey of things that they know are going to be the most important things that you look for in a particular EA. And you just give them some feedback. This is working well. This is what's not working well, and so forth, and boom. And that kind of becomes, for somebody like an EA, like that actually becomes more of what that KPI is. That's actually really important, because if an EA doesn't have a KPI like that, then what is their North Star? I'm going to work hard and then hope I keep my boss happy, and then we're all good. Or it's like, actually, here's the 10 most important things that I look for in a EA, and then we're just going to give you some. We're just going to have this on repeat, and I'm going to just fill it out every week real quick, let you know where you stand.
And that's a great point there. How often do you suggest people review their KPIs? I mean, so a lot of companies, do like biannual reviews or something like that. At Chore, by the way, we do monthly check-ins to review all your KPIs. Is a one-on-one with your manager, and we write it down and we track it every single month, and whether you're at below, above, things like that. So I think we're doing all that stuff. But what do you suggest for most companies?
So it kind of does depend on the size of the company, right? So here's an example. Let's say you're flying a plane, right? And maybe you get this little Cessna, and it's just just has enough power to bring you up and fly, and so there's very little instruments, because everything is just by sight, right? You look to the left, you look to the right, you look in front of you. Anytime you go for a flight, more or less, like, you know where you're going. You don't really take out a map or anything. Like, you kind of know where you're going, right? You recognize the roads and so forth. And it is what it is. You're just kind of cruising nice and slow. So in that point, what are the core KPIs that you're looking at? Maybe you're looking at elevation. You might be looking at speed. How much gas do I have in the fuel tank? Simple, right?
Yep, straightforward.
And then you might only be looking in that every once in a while, right? Because most of the time you're just staring out the window enjoying yourself. But now let's say you're in a fighter jet, right? You're in a fighter jet, you're moving incredibly fast.
Mm-hmm.
If you are 1 degree off of your trajectory, but you're moving at like 500 miles an hour, it doesn't take long before you are so far off course.
Yeah, very cool.
Right. And so if you're in a fighter jet, you are obsessively staring at that data. Right. And you're looking at that data very frequently. Now, you might be, looking at the data, and then you might, look around for enemy targets and everything else. And then you look at it and it's like, boom. But now let's say you're in a rocket ship. Right. And the rocket ship. So, a fighter jet could be like an 8-figure company, right? Or a fast growing 7-figure company.
Yep.
But then now let's say you're in a rocket ship. Well, now you're Amazon, right? And now you're moving like lightning fast. Well, if you're in a rocket ship, you're looking at this data like multiple times throughout the day, like boom, 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 multiple times throughout the day. Because if something goes wrong when they're generating, millions and millions and millions of transactions every few minutes, and something goes wrong, like, they're not going to wait a week.
Right. They need to know immediately.
They know immediately. But, if you're a 7-8-figure company, that's okay. Maybe if you just track it every week, right? Set a specific day, you track it every week. If you're smaller than that, I like to say minimum practice should be 1 week. But sometimes it's like, well, we didn't really bring in any sales. We really didn't bring any leads. It's kind of like, why bother? So it's, especially in the early startup, general rule of thumb for virtually all the clients that we work with is set one specific time every single week. Do it every week. Make it a practice. Put it a recurring event on your calendar. I have a bias towards Monday because it sets the tone and the direction for the whole week. Right. So for myself and my chief operating officer, we get together twice a week. So we'll look at what happens on Monday and review the data. And then we'll just do a quick high-level overview and recap on Friday, and then go back again on Monday.
And do you for all your, is it just the data is getting pulled up from your CRM? You just you built your own proprietary systems to pull in the information?
So everything is, we do it on spreadsheets. Okay. And we do it for a reason on spreadsheets, because we want, and everybody has to report up. So if you have a KPI, I don't actually go to put your KPI on the spreadsheet. If you have a KPI, you're putting it on the spreadsheet, right? So, and there's a psychological reason for that too. And the reason why we have them manually do it, because you're manually putting your number, you're comparing it against the target, and you're also going to mark if you are on target, if you're on track, off track, or marginal.
And this is each individual on your entire company.
Every single person without fail. And so when they're entering their number, and it's constantly reminded of where they're at, on target, off target, and where it needs to be, like, there is a much bigger, like, it means more than when you just log into a system, look at it, and then shut it back down again. And so we do everything on spreadsheets. And here's the other part of KPIs. This is like a mini course in and of itself. The other part, because remember, we like our data to be contextualized. Mm-hmm. And we look for trends, we look for this and that. So when we do our data, because we do track weekly, we'll do days 1 through 7, 8 through 14, 15 through 21, 22 through 28, and then 29 through 31. And every week is the same thing. The first 7 days, the next group of 7 days. We don't do January 1st through January 7th. And then, that way it's just days 1 through 7 of each month. I mean, you could do February 1st and 2nd, or Monday through Friday. Like, we don't do Monday through Friday, rather, is what I, meant to say.
Yep.
because we want to compare apples with apples as much as we can.
Yep.
What does the first 7 days of this month look like? The first 7 days of this month look like the first 7 days of this month, and the first 7 days across the board. So now, it's always the first 7 days instead of the first week, which might have had 3 days, and then the next month
Doesn't matter.
So we find that we have a lot better information that way.
And so everyone on the team knows they have to enter that data Monday morning, first thing. You then look at it midday or something with your COO.
Yep.
Are they all entering it in the same spreadsheet so everyone can see everyone else's data they're entering, and someone could look and see your entire revenue for the whole company or something if that's the target?
Some is locked, right? So we might lock some spreadsheets if we just feel that it's going to be confidential. But the rest, everybody else's, all the team, the rest of everything else is public to everybody.
That's awesome.
It's part of that has to do with when I did CrossFit. I mean, I still do a CrossFit-like workout now, but when I did CrossFit like a long time ago, it was interesting because, prior to doing CrossFit, I just did my workout and it is what it was. Then I go to CrossFit and first day I do my workout and then the instructor goes, "All right, what'd you get for a score?" And I'm like, well, "Why?" And he's like, "Because we're putting it on the board." Now I always went in the morning, right? So it was the first class of the morning and he's like, "We're putting it on the board." And I'm like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, everyone's
like, so I'm like, damn. And they put it on the score and
on the board.
I'm embarrassed. Yeah, on the board. And like, no joke, God's honest truth, I scored less than a woman who was multiple months pregnant. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, how could I let,
But I'm sure that pushed you to be like, all right, I need to get way better.
Yeah, I was one of the last people that whole day. And I was like, because I was, I didn't think I had to be accountable to my results. And so then, I liked that concept and I said, how can we apply this in business? And then at some point, I don't know if you've heard of the company Agora Financial.
I've heard of Agora, yeah.
No, multi-billion dollar company. Well, I had built a few campaigns that were outperforming Agora's campaigns. And so one of the heads of the company was like, "I don't understand. Like, fly this guy in here and let's see what's going on." So they flew me out to their offices. And one of the things that I noticed when I walked in their door was that they had everybody's KPIs all over the place. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, whoa, this is fascinating. And the head of that division says, "You like that, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, this is wild. I'm actually just kind of processing to what the mindset is behind why you're doing this." And he goes, "Well, it's in the main area. So as every employee walks in to work, they're reminded of the importance of these KPIs. And then everybody's KPIs is posted so that it's clear who's performing and who's not performing, because nobody wants to be a non-performer." And this is the difference between when you build a culture of high performance,
yep,
and then you build just an average culture. Like when you build a culture of high performance, there's, people always want to be that better, and there's expectation of being better. And you're going to notice that a high performing culture, the more A players you bring on your team, the more of an expectation that everybody else is going to be an A player, and an expectation that everybody else is going to be held accountable.
Yep.
And there's going to be KPIs and all of this other stuff, right?
And so for that example with Agora, but also for you guys, is that then it's like, here's your main KPI for each individual, and like, did you hit it? What is your number for that week? Did you hit it? Did you go below it? Is it sort of just like three things, like main KPI, your actual number, above or below target?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a core KPI. Like this is your main number, mm-hmm, and then some supporting KPIs.
And they fill that out every week. I'm impressed.
Yeah, every single week without fail.
That's awesome.
Yep. Everybody does. Even our subcontractors that work with us, they are held to a KPI.
And you tell them like, hey, as part of being a subcontractor with us, this is going to be the expectation every week as you update where you are.
Yeah, we want to know. It's like, if we're bringing you in, like, you're being held to a certain level of accountability, because even though you're You're 1099. You're still a member of this team, a subcontracting member of this team. But, this is part of the rules. And nobody's pushed back. They've always been fine with that.
And so to maybe sort of wrap up this segment, because there's so much more I want to ask you about yourself too. But is this sort of like why you built the company Predictable Profits? Is essentially if you follow this plan, you get predictable profits. Is that sort of the thesis at a high level? Like, tell me more about the company. Like, is that why you built the company in the first place? Was like, put all these things in place, you will achieve predictable profits.
Well, yes, put the framework in place. I mean, what we're talking about here is what's known as data intelligence. That's one of the three components of scale, right? Which is data intelligence. But the whole operating system is built on three major components, and then each major component has three subcomponents, right? So the three major components are setup, sales, and scale. So setup is what we talked about very early on in this episode. Setup is all the different ways in which you create, capture, nurture demand. It's taking a company from, I don't know who you are, to now all of a sudden I want to do business with you, right? So that's all about setup. Setup is the foundation that helps to support sales. Once you get into sales, because setup creates buyer-ready leads in the sales. This is really important. I'm going to segue a little bit, but it's really important to understand the importance of setup. 96% of all buying behavior happens before somebody gets on the phone with you.
Yeah, 100%.
96% of all buying behavior. All too often, agencies and other companies struggle because they put too much of the responsibility on sales. And they're like, sales has to bring in deals. Sales has to bring in leads. But the thing is like prior to 2020, marketing was over here and sales were over here. There were two totally separate departments. And then what happened is things began to converge. Now I look at it as almost like two overlapping concentric circles. 100%. They formed what we refer to as a unified business development division. Sales and marketing are overlapped. With 96% of all buying behavior happening before somebody gets on the phone, like marketing and sales have to come together.
We call it our go-to-market team, and it's sales and marketing all together in one. They all report together. They do a stand-up every week together. It's all in one.
And the thing is when you look at what drives conversion, right? What drives conversion? What drives conversion actually is consumption. It's consumption drives conversion.
Consumption of like all the other material beforehand. Is that the idea?
Content. How many brand impressions, how long they're staying on the website, videos they've watched, emails they've read, articles they've, so forth, white papers. Consumption drives conversion. I had one of the top digital marketing experts in the country ask me, how do I shorten my sales cycle? And I said, well, in the past, what you did is you optimized for conversion. But if you prioritize for consumption first, and then have a secondary goal of conversion, you'll find that you're shortening your sales cycle and you do that much better. Prioritize to get people to consume. Within a short period after, I listened to him as he was sharing his results, and it went up by 1,953 or 56. I can't remember.
Wow.
So, it's consumption drives conversion. So say a setup is largely responsible for consumption, and that helps move them to buyer ready leads so that by the time somebody gets on the phone with you, now what they're saying is, does this actually make sense? Like, should we do something together? Right. And they're just qualifying. If you think about it, like when you're buying a car, you don't get on the car lot and be like, show me everything that's here. Let's see, like, how much should I pay for this? It's like, you already know. You're informed buyer. That's the way buyers are. And we got a whole other discussion on that and the trends that we're seeing in B2B sales and everything through the year 2030. That's a whole other discussion. But that's sales. And you want to be able to break through from founder-led sales. And then sales is a lot more than just selling one time. Like, you want to add recurring revenue. 50% of all your revenue, I don't care what industry you're in and so forth, should be recurring revenue.
Great.
And then they move into scale. And then, through scale, there's different components. Like we've talked about data intelligence. We've also, there's, building that best self team and having the right systems and whatnot in place as well. So.
And sort of super tactical question for you. If you do all the right pieces up at the top, what does that lead to? What is the sales conversion rate you should see if you're doing this stuff really well? Like if people show up and they're like, they've done 96% of their consumption. They know all about you. They've been touched 8 times, whatever the number is. What's a conversion rate that you should see?
So when we're brought in to optimize sales teams and really build in world-class sales organizations, if I see that somebody's conversion is about 28%, then it's usually like, okay, well, there's probably going to be some other opportunities that we want to focus in on, because 28% is, all in all, fairly solid. We've seen conversion rates as high as 67%. So you can go way up, and it depends on, is the market cold? Is it, warm? Like, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but at bare bones minimum, 28%, like bare bones minimum. If you put buckets of cold, warm, everything else, I mean, I'd like to get it closer to 35% and consistently sitting at 35%. The reason why I say at 28%, we might look somewhere else, is because if you look at like a Formula One driver as an example, right? Getting you to the 80% of driving like a Formula One driver is actually fairly simple. Like getting you to that 80% level. Closing the gap between 80% and 96%. Now, every incremental percentage point of an increase is much harder, take more energy, time, and resources to get you there. But when you close the gap between 96% and being the best in the world, it is extremely difficult and time consuming and whatnot. My son is training to be a professional race car driver. He's training as it is right now. And if he is 0.1 seconds faster this weekend, if he finds a way to just cut 0.1 of a second, like think about it, like that's almost even faster than this.
Try
0.1. He's going to look at that as a massive victory, right? That he was in one race. I think it was the difference between first and 20th actually came from 0.1. It was the most ridiculous thing ever. Or first and 10th, I think was 0.1. So let's think about that for a minute. It says 0.1. So when we look at sales, it's the same thing. It's like that getting you to 28%, like that's solid. Like that's, that we can get you there, no problem. Getting you from 28 to then 35%, like we can get you there. But then now we got to be a lot more methodical and strategic. It can take more resources, but it's really not going to be just the salesperson. We do have to look at marketing and the impacts that marketing is having. Of course, we've got to look at the pipeline, how the pipeline is being managed. We've got to take a look at follow-up to see what the follow-up actually looks like, how they're staying top of mind, and the retargeting and that entire component there. Like there's a lot that actually goes into it. Man, that was a long-winded answer to it.
No, that's great. I mean, I love this stuff. But so I want to make sure, because we've this has actually been fascinating, but I want to make sure we talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey as well, and talk through the fact, like, to remind people. I mean, you said managing 3 companies at least right now, have founded unknown numbers otherwise. How did you get to be that sort of entrepreneur, number one? And then let's talk a little bit about how you are able to manage that many companies. I mean, most people, once again, like you see a few people like Jack Dorsey or Elon Musk who are able to manage multiple companies, but it's pretty rare. And most people, frankly, fail at managing one company. So what's the secret here?
Got it. So you asked me a lot there. So I guess I'll start with what brought me to that point. Some people,
personal history, lifestyle, who knows what made you to take the hard path of being an entrepreneur.
So my dad was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And the thing is that he worked every waking hour of every day. Mm-hmm. And so when I got up in the morning, he was already gone and he was at work. It wasn't until after I went to bed that he came home, and he did that seven days a week. I didn't know my dad until the 3rd grade because he worked all the time. Now, every once in a while when I did see my dad, though, it's a kid, if you ever want to be something and make something yourself, you got to be an entrepreneur. So like every little kid, I wanted my dad's love and attention. And so one day I decided I was going to be a business owner. So I just drew artwork and went to my neighbors and sold artwork to my neighbors. and they paid me for it. And, I'm like, my dad thought that was really cool. And, so it was like,
Do you have any of that art still in your house, like your third grade, fourth grade year old art?
I don't, but that actually would have been pretty
You should
cool.
go find those neighbors and be like, can I buy that back from you? I'll pay you a premium.
Yeah, that actually would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. But then that sort of like created that bug. And then, it was always like going from my dad's support and love and, and everything else. And so I've never had a traditional quote unquote real job. I scooped ice cream in high school and stuff, whatever. But I never had a quote unquote real job after graduating from college. I started another business nominated by Ernst & Young as one of the nation's best seed stage companies. Created my first multi-million-dollar business at the age of 24. And, I just continued to build and grow different companies until 2010. That's when somebody offered to pay me to grow their business. And I started Predictable Profits.
Yeah.
And now we have the ability of working with just phenomenal 6, 7, 8, even some 9-figure companies, which is awesome. In terms of like, how do I do it as much as I do? It's actually quite simple. It's just having and surrounding yourself with a great team, right? So there's a difference between, I think, a lot of different people are like, okay, I want to hire somebody, but I'm not willing to pay them for it. So I'm going to hire somebody, try to get them to do everything, and I'm going to pay very little. Therefore, they only attract a C player. And they get this C player onto the team that requires so much management, so much hand-holding, and so much oversight and everything else that really doesn't help you much. There's not much of you're just break even, maybe, if anything, but you're just spending a lot of time, right? When you start moving to a B player, you might get, less, like it's just less management per se. There's still going to be oversight, less, but less. And you may get an ROI of like, maybe 2 to 4 to 1. It's it's more like 2 to 1, right? 2 to 1. So you pay somebody 60 grand, you make 120 on their efforts, right? It's like, okay. Then you bring in an A player, they require very, very, very little oversight, like very little oversight. They report their KPIs, maybe you do some intellectual ping pong here and there, but very little oversight. And their ROI is like 10 to 1 plus. Right. So it's like you surround yourself with A players, and your job is as a founder, CEO, ultimately should just be that of a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the examples that I like to use all the time with our clients is that of a cruise ship. Right. If you think about a cruise ship, like the captain of the ship is going to stand back and they're going to go, okay, so we're in Miami and we're going to go over to London. And so, all right, so let me plot the path and let's take a look at, see if there's any storms that I should be aware of that are coming our way. Are there any currents that we can leverage that's going to allow us to get there quicker and faster and a lot less, spending a lot less gas? And, and they just kind of plan very strategically. Meanwhile, they've got somebody operating the boat and steering and then, all this other stuff and all that's going on. But the captain is really paying attention to, is there going to be, there's no icebergs, but let's pretend that they could be icebergs. What are the threats, what are the opportunities, the whole deal.
Okay.
And then, God forbid, something happens. All of a sudden, there's this massive rogue wave. And now this rogue wave is coming. That's the only time when the captain will come over and tell the person who's currently driving the boat, step aside, let me take over. Then takes over, gets the whole cabin and crew, over that rogue wave safely, then steps back and hands it back over again. Because the thing is the captain itself, if the captain was driving the ship the whole time, or even going down to the kitchen and serving a meal or whatever, anytime then the captain's not planning ahead and seeing the future. Founder and a CEO ultimately needs to build their business so they can be always operating into the future, not working in the day-to-day. For a long time, many founders and CEOs were able to get away with that, not having to be in the day-to-day all the time. And now what's happening is every business across the world is being disrupted by AI. Every single one, regardless, my business, your business, there's not one that's not being disrupted. The thing is so many people are so stuck in the weeds, they don't know how to adopt or evolve and change with AI. Right now they know things are coming. The way that I look at it is it's going to be, within a 12-month window. It's much shorter than that. It's probably going to be closer to a 6 to 9 month window. There's massive disruption coming.
Oh man, we're gonna run out of time. I would love to talk to you more about that, but
yeah, and so they'll be looking for a life jacket instead of.
So what does that mean for a founder then? Are they essentially saying like this is the rogue wave coming AI, or is it it's a freaking hurricane and the whole ocean is in trouble, and so I need to start steering the ship myself?
Right now, working into the future to say what are the different ways that we have to adjust our message, our service, and so forth, as opposed to, the wait for a little while and then the captain's going to do everything, right?
Right. So how does a captain make sure, like in your case, running 3 companies, how do you make sure you're not deeply diving in the weeds given this disruption that's occurring? Like, how do you still make sure you're look out over the horizon, plotting where the boat should go?
So excellent. So, right now, if we just look at predictable profits, it's, identifying where do we think AI is going to be disrupting our business right now? And then what is the plan and the strategy for overcoming that? And so, we've put together a plan for overcoming that, and then the team is implementing and executing on the plan, right? So now I can still continue to work in the future, and then and then it's also, we have to look in the future for our clients. How do we best support our clients?
So to restate that, essentially, you're saying like you've created a plan with your team, you set KPIs for everyone on the team, and then you say go achieve those KPIs, and I'll review how we're doing. And maybe every quarter you're updating that plan because the world is changing pretty quickly. So you're updating that plan on a regular basis.
Yeah. No, look, I'm not perfect, because there are still several times where I'll find myself working in the business and then have to step out. And we're all going to do that. There'll be times we have to work in and then step out. But, the ultimate is to continue working in the future.
And then how do you make sure you're finding the right people for all these positions that you're identifying and saying, okay, these are the right positions? What are some heuristics or key ideas for hiring to build that great team around you?
So other than the KPIs that we talked about earlier, I make sure that everybody, it's called like results in advance, that everybody delivers on something before they get hired so that we can get a sense for that strategic thinking. So for example, when I brought in my chief of staff, now actually, he's the one to give credit where credit's due. He's the one that gave me this idea, and we've been doing this all across the board now for all hires. When he applied for this job, there's like a couple hundred people that wanted the position. It came down to the top 3. He was in there. He was in the top 3. He submitted a 30, 60, 90-day plan. And I was like, well, this is really good. He's like, this is what I would do if I got hired. So now in any other strategic role, what we've done is we tell people, you need to submit, if you were to get this job, what's the next 30, 60, 90-day plan for you? Because we want to see like, how well are they thinking and so forth.
And I bet it probably helps them also think through what the role is really going to be about and what should that look like from their perspective too.
Yeah.
So it's a good action. So that's part of just saying like, hey, you have to deliver something, show us what you deliver. And so before you make the final offer, you say submit. In your case, it's just a 30, 60, 90 plan. Is that for every role?
Well, it could be different. Like if it's a marketing role, would say something like, I want you to go look at every publicly available, page and this and that, blah, blah, that we're doing. And then I want you to provide me with, feedback on what do you think is working and not working, and what are some of the things that you would change.
Yep.
And so we want to see that analysis, see that level of strategic thinking. For sales, sales is interesting. It's a 4-step process. And then one of those processes, it's actually step number 2, where we'll tell them, I want you to go to this page, familiarize yourself with the service, and anything else you need to know about the company. When we start this next call, I am going to act as this particular person, and we are going to role play.
Yeah.
And the only thing is, I want you to keep the conversation going. If you don't have an answer, make it up on the spot. So poetic license, make it up, keep the conversation going. And then at the end of the call, we'll give them certain common objections that we'll see. Like we'll say things like, all right, well, let me think about it. I got to go talk to my partner. Or one of my favorites is, okay, can you send me a proposal? And then we'll get off the phone, and then later I'll have them review it. But even like when we talk about send me a proposal, if the salesperson goes, boom, that was awesome. I go, what makes that awesome? You told me to send you a proposal. I'm like, that's a blow off, dude.
Correct.
It's people who are trying to get off the phone with you, right?
Yep.
But you didn't ask me if I would sign it or move forward.
Yep.
Right. So it's simple things like that.
Yeah, no, I love that. We actually do something similar. I probably make it harder. I just say like, I want you to pitch to me without knowing. They've had a few of their interviews, and I presume at that point they know enough about our company and read our website pretty closely.
Yeah.
To have an idea of how to pitch us, and they won't know all the details, but they should be good enough to get it done at that point. And certainly with us, we have so much content out there. There's a number of ways to understand who and what we do and why we do it. So
yeah, I got it.
No, I love that. Okay, so that makes total sense. So
I mean, I imagine you're a pro at this because I mean that you could probably teach me a thing or two because I've been to your website and I know what you do. And
good. Pitch me. Come on, Troy. Pitch Troy to me. You guys should be using Troy. I don't actually know how big you guys are, but your chief of staff shouldn't be doing any of this work. You should be hiring us to take care of all your back office operations because it's not specialized in core to you. So that's
well, I mean, there may be another conversation around that. But
yeah, you should outsource non-core work such as this because it's all the same as standard, and get people who are experts and get your chief of staff doing the high level stuff that he or she is fantastic at. Okay, so all that makes sense. So then you go through this hiring process. Are there any are there questions just like outside of like providing something? Is there like one question when you're like, I love this question to see if someone's really a fit?
One of the ones that I'd like is, and this has been completely eye-opening. I'll say, what is one thing that I haven't found out about you yet that eventually I will, that would disqualify you from getting this job? And the answers that people have given me, I found that one was a criminal, like actually, arrested. That it didn't show up on his show up on his record. Shockingly, of another one was in trouble for fraud, and there was a lawsuit that was going on, and I was like, what the heck is but it's like all information I never ever would have found.
That's a great question. What about people who say, well, there isn't anything like that there, or like there's always something. So
there's always something.
The one thing, it's like the deep dark secret in your head that like you be worried, not maybe personal, just something like there's always something. Okay, I might not be a fit because of this.
If somebody said that to me, I might come back with and say, look, I've been diagnosed as having one of the worst cases of learning disabilities that the doctor had ever seen. It's something that I struggle with on a continual daily basis. And, at times I have a very difficult time, focusing. And I said, audio is a strong weakness of mine. And many times, I have to adapt and, to make that work. And, that I have literal physical limitations that could, impede my ability to take this role. And it's very honest. I have been diagnosed as one of the worst cases of learning disabilities.
Really?
It's something I do manage every day.
Yeah, where you made it and how you turned that into probably a superpower of yours.
It is.
So talk a little bit about like breakdown between the idea of like, look, a lot of our audience is VC-backed fundraise companies, but also there's agencies or small businesses. How do you think through the pros and cons of each of those sort of mindsets, right? If you're like, hey, I'm building a VC-backed company, go really quick, but burn a lot of cash, maybe an agency where it's like, hey, like this could be a lifestyle business, or am I growing it for something that's really big? Or maybe a small business that is like, hey, I'm just trying to build like a good company that, I like to bake so I can bake some good pies.
Got it. A business doesn't survive or die based on a good idea. It all comes down to momentum, right? And so it's like building a campfire. Little fire is fragile, blows out quickly, but all of a sudden you get like a big fire, like what went out in California. You pour water on it all over the place and you just can't control it, right? And so different companies have different levels of, they're just some are more fragile than others. And so we look for, okay, actions plus resources equal goal. What are the resources available to us? How do we add momentum as much as possible to build robustness into the organization so that they can continue to grow and thrive? A lot of that does also come back down to data.
Mm-hmm. So just generally, it doesn't matter what company and industry you're in. It's just like, get the data, watch the data, track it. How do you, are there any pieces you recommend to people as a founder to get good at that, like to build a muscle around the data? So, a lot of founders start their business because they're world-class at AI, or they're a world-class chef, or they're a world-class, whatever it is, right? They don't do it because they're world-class at data. In fact, that's probably a skill set that's tough for them.
Perfect example. Another client this morning, got on the phone with her. When we started working together, she was only doing $250,000 a year. She loves what she did. She went to school for what she does. She loves what she does, the whole deal. She's super good and she's excellent at it, right? Now she makes $250,000 every 3 weeks. And why she was able to do that is because I said, we have to move you out of being in the business as the practitioner to now thinking like a CEO. And so that actually means that she does very little of what she did when she was $250,000 a year. Like, she was working in the business. She was working directly with clients. Now she does very little of that, right? And so in order to do that, there's a difference between line of sight. Like, Adam, when your business was tiny, you had direct line of sight. You knew everything about every person that works with you. You knew everything about every client. You knew everything about every vendor, everything. You knew everything. You had direct line of sight. Now that you've grown this successful organization, now you start losing line of sight. Now you may not know every team member as intimately as you did before. Now you likely don't know all the customers and all that other stuff. And so if you don't have line of sight, that's where things they get dangerous, and you get a lot of variability, and your business is a lot more fragile than when you have that line of sight. And so that line of sight has to be systems, processes, data to make sure all that is being followed. And data in the beginning isn't sexy, and people, their eyes get glossed over. They don't want to do it. They just want more leads. They just want more sales. They want all that stuff. Yeah. Until you realize, wait a minute, knowing this number actually helps me make more money, actually brings me more leads, and I do this a lot easier and faster without any guesswork. Then all of a sudden people obsess over data. They love it because it's like they know what lever to pull and push. Like that woman I talked about this morning was doing $250,000 a year. Now, $250,000 every 3 weeks. And she was like, okay, what do I need to do? Actually, I'd like to bring in a little bit more money here. I said, the cool thing is you've got the data. We're just going to put 10% more budget right here.
Yeah.
And you'll get it.
Yeah.
You have room. And she's like, oh, it's that easy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's just put 10% more on this ad budget, a budget right here, because you already have it, and you'll be all set.
Yeah.
And done.
Yeah.
You know how long that would take if you didn't have that information? You'd probably be building another funnel and, or another, whatever it might be.
Right. Because you wouldn't even know where to put that money in the first place.
Yeah. You wouldn't know. Once you have the data, you also know, like, what are the pain points and what are the things that attract and convert and all that other stuff.
So I know you might have the same answer to this as everything else, because it maybe all just comes back to the data. But are there certain traits about the most enduring companies or most enduring founders, founders like yourself who go back and do it over and over and over again and get it right? Is it data, or is it a mindset, or what makes these companies, maybe these individuals, just so good that they can just start a new company every time and it just crushes?
It is the consistent, imperfect, persistent action. Consistent, persistent, imperfect action.
Okay. Break that down a little bit. So what is doing the same thing over and over again, breaking through, even if it's not perfect, and taking action? All right,
they prioritize action over everything else.
Yeah.
And they don't wait for it to be perfect. They just do it. And then they just keep doing it. And it's like, we've seen some people who are just wait for the perfect sales script.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, no, just jump on the phone and fall on your face. What you have is good enough. And then let's get some feedback and let's make an adjustment and then do it again and then do it again and then do it again until you figure out the perfect script.
How much does that work though with people? I would worry that sometimes that gets to like I call it shiny object syndrome, but where you're like an ADD founder is like, oh, we're gonna go do this, go do this, go do this, go do this, and you don't. Is that the persistent part?
That's the persistent part.
How long do you stick with it then before you move on to something else?
Everything works and nothing works at the same time. So, if you're going to commit to something, the default is this has the ability to work. You might have to bring in somebody else to help, bring you perspective or, something for that matter. But everything works and nothing works. If you're going to do something, see it all the way through. I think probably one of the bigger mistakes that I made in my life was that I did what you just did. Well, you not did, but what you just told me, which is like jumping from one thing to another. I would try something, put forth some effort, didn't get results as quickly as I wanted to be. So I stopped what I was doing and I started something else, tried something, didn't get results quickly, tried something else. Adam, I'm afraid to admit this, but I did that for years.
Yeah.
Years.
Yep.
I've lost millions of dollars and countless years on opportunities because I didn't just commit to seeing something through over and over again. I get nauseous at the idea of thinking about how much I wasted just by jumping around too much.
How do you know what that right amount is to not jump though? Like where is that line? Because sometimes you could stick with things for too long and maybe you don't know what the opportunities you missed out on because you stuck with something for too long.
The only time I would actually not continue on is if I had somebody else with objective experience tell me that it's time to go. Because my experience will be more subjective and biased towards like, I'm done. But instead, I'll bring in a mentor, a coach, somebody with experience just to be able to say, look, man, here's everything that's going on. This isn't going to work and here's why.
Yeah.
No. Okay. That is what it is.
Yeah. So then you learn from someone else, but otherwise, like if you believe it and have faith in that and see some, obviously some good things happening, just stick with it. I've learned a lesson myself, by the way, many, many times, and I can give you stories about where I've also not stuck with it and have lost a ton of money because of it. So I have a quick personal question for you as well. This sort of about, work-life balance or unity, but it's actually more, you sort of brought up a personal one, right? So you talked about how you are an entrepreneur because of your dad and the fact he was never home. How did you apply that or didn't apply that to your children, right? You talked about your son who's a race car driver. Did you do things differently? And on one hand, you could say your dad did a great job parenting you because he pushed you to be who you are today and do all these things. But I'm not sure if your mom liked that he wasn't around ever, and maybe as a kid, you probably didn't appreciate it either. So
no.
What are the right ways to deal with all that?
Well, we're talking from my home. So I made the intentional decision that I was going to build a home office. And I have 2 daughters as well, so 3 kids. And even though I could be more productive if I brought my whole team together in an office, and they've wanted an office to bring everybody together. And eventually I will do that. But during my kids' most formidable years, because of my experience with my dad, this was a non-negotiable for me. I want to be here. When my kids come home from school, I can see them, give them a hug. I've never missed one of the special things that were going on. I've always been there when they learned to walk, when they said the first words, all that other stuff. And that was my non-negotiable. And so that's how I'm less of a fan of the coin work-life balance. I look at more like work-life integration.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you integrate work and life in a way that it just complements one another? And man, that's just how we do it. Or how
you and I are very similar. Our dads sound fairly similar. And the way we live our lives. I mean, I'm from home as well. And it's great. Our company is fully remote partially for those reasons. There's a lot of other reasons why I think remote is great. But so Charlie, I'd like to ask a few last really quick questions and make sure you don't miss your hard stop. The one is there a single piece of advice, and maybe you sort of already just gave it about like not missing out on things, but that you would give your younger self if you went back in time to when you first started to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Is there any advice you would have given your younger self?
it would be not to jump around as much as I did, right? See something, see it all the way through. Like, oh gosh, that was, such a mistake.
Is there a single piece of advice that you would give every entrepreneur today to just be the most successful version of themselves or an excellent entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, well, we've covered so much of it today, and we talked about, the data as well. I also think, another part of it is to be uncomfortable, to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. When I look at where I've lost the most amount of money in my life, like anytime I lost more than $1 million, it was because I got comfortable and I took my foot off the gas pedal, and I just Tony Robbins has a saying that if you're not growing, you're dying. And I've later come to understand what that means. And so it's just, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so, that means part of that, when we talked about consistent, persistent, imperfect action, like moving forward, even in the face of adversity, you'll do better. Like if you think about it, Adam, we all do this, myself included. Like, that there's something that you should be doing right now that you're not doing. And it's likely either because it might come from a place of fear or uncomfortability, or maybe you're nervous about it, or feel like maybe you don't have enough skill or something like that. Like there's things that I know I should be doing that I'm not doing. But if we continue to lean in on those things that we should be doing that we don't, our businesses would be exponentially greater and grow faster and everything else than they are right now.
Yeah, no, I certainly think as a founder myself, I always wonder, I'm like, am I doing enough every single day? I do work really hard. I think a lot of the right things, and yet I'm still, is this enough? Am I pushing hard enough? Am I going fast enough? Are we doing the right things? How do we get to that next step? So very much on the same page with you. Charlie, you called yourself Charlie, but Charles is also your name, but whatever, Charlie, Gaudet, whatever you want, it has been such an absolute pleasure. How can people find you if they want to learn more, if they want to understand how to get predictable profits? What would you recommend? How can people find you?
Awesome. So they can always check us out, predictableprofits.com. Again, that is predictableprofits.com. They can get my book, the Predictable Profits Playbook, on the website. They can just get it for free plus shipping. They can listen to my podcast, the Beyond Seven Figures podcast, and they get more information there. And if they can learn about, maybe if they want to check out one of my other companies, foundersfuel.co, right?
Yeah.
That's, we talked about me and my wrestle with learning disabilities and focus. That sort of started by accident, foundersfuel.co. And yeah, I mean, or connect with me on LinkedIn, but you have to, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, tell me that you are a listener of this podcast. If you do that, I will accept you. So check us out.
Done. I love it. Thank you so much for your time. Time is really precious, right? You can never get it back. So thank you for spending some of it with me, my audience. I sincerely appreciate you. Thank you.
Together we're better. Thanks, buddy.